Famous surgeon overhears fiancé cheating in the on-call room, so he married a humble nurse with the kindest heart. If you're here for heartfelt moments and unexpected turns, like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Dr. Adrian Cole's hands never shook. Not when he held a beating heart between his palms. Not when the monitors flatlined and everyone else in the or held their breath. But tonight, as he stood frozen outside the on-call room at St. Mary's General Hospital, his hands trembled like autumn leaves. The soft glow from under the door cast shadows across his polished Italian shoes, the ones Vanessa had picked out for him because they looked more distinguished for someone of his caliber. He'd come back to retrieve the Williams file, a routine surgery scheduled for tomorrow morning that he'd forgotten in his rush to meet Vanessa for their late dinner reservation. It was nearly midnight, and the hospital corridors hummed with the quiet efficiency of the night shift. He reached for the door handle, then stopped. Voices drifted through the thin walls, low, intimate, punctuated by soft laughter that made his chest tighten with an inexplicable dread. "God, I've missed this." A woman's voice whispered, breathless and familiar in a way that made Adrian's world tilt off its axis. That voice. He knew that voice better than his own heartbeat. It was the same voice that had whispered yes when he'd proposed 6 months ago on the balcony of the Four Seasons, overlooking the city lights. The same voice that had practiced their wedding vows in the mirror of their shared penthouse apartment just last week. "Vanessa, we have to be careful," came a man's reply, deeper, rougher than Adrian's own measured tones. "If Adrian finds out, Adrian won't find out." Vanessa's laugh was sharp, cruel in a way Adrian had never heard before. "He's too busy playing the perfect surgeon, the perfect fiancé. He thinks our engagement is some kind of fairy tale." Adrian's breath caught in his throat. The file folder slipped from his numb fingers, papers scattering across the linoleum floor like broken promises. He didn't bend to pick them up. He couldn't move, could barely breathe. "You don't love him?" The man's voice carried a smugness that made Adrian's jaw clench. There was a pause, a heartbeat of silence that stretched into eternity before Vanessa spoke again. "Love Adrian?" Her voice dripped with disdain. "Marcus, please. Adrian's just a name. A prestigious name that looks good on wedding invitations and medical journal bylines. But love? I want fire, not charity. I want passion, not politeness." Adrian Cole is many things, but he's certainly not stimulating. The words hit Adrian like a physical blow, each syllable a scalpel cutting through the carefully constructed life he thought he'd built. 6 years of medical school, 3 years of residency, 2 years of fellowship, and countless nights of missing dinners, missed conversations, missed moments. Also, he could become the man worthy of a woman like Vanessa Richardson. Dr. Vanessa Richardson, whose neurological research had been featured on the cover of 3 medical journals this year alone, whose father owned half the private hospitals in the state, whose mother hosted charity galas that raised millions for children's hospitals. The woman who was supposed to be his partner in building a medical dynasty that would change lives and leave a legacy. The woman who apparently saw him as nothing more than a prestigious accessory. "When do you think you'll break it off?" Marcus asked, and Adrian could hear the rustle of clothing, the soft sound of skin against skin that made bile rise in his throat. "After the wedding, obviously." Vanessa's tone was matter-of-fact, as if she were discussing surgical schedules. "The Richardson-Cole union is too valuable to my family's medical empire to dissolve before it's legal. Besides, Adrian's connections at Johns Hopkins and the Mayo Clinic will be useful. A year, maybe 2, then I'll file for divorce. Irreconcilable differences. I'll get half of everything, including his practice. And until then, we're very, very careful. And very, very creative." Their laughter mingled in the darkness beyond the door, a sound that would haunt Adrian's dreams for weeks to come. He stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, watching his future crumble through a crack in a door he'd never intended to open. The Williams file lay forgotten at his feet, pages scattered like the pieces of his shattered trust. Finally, moving like a man underwater, Adrian backed away from the door. His footsteps were silent on the hospital floors, a skill learned from years of navigating between sleeping patients and worried families. But inside his chest, his heart hammered so loudly he was certain the entire hospital could hear it breaking. He didn't confront them. Some part of his analytical surgeon's mind noted this detail with clinical detachment. Dr. Adrian Cole, who had never backed down from a difficult conversation or a challenging diagnosis, was walking away from the most important confrontation of his life. But what was there to say? What words could undo what he'd heard? What explanation could transform Vanessa's cold calculation back into the love he believed they shared? The hospital corridors stretched before him, familiar yet foreign. How many nights had he walked these halls, thinking about his future with Vanessa? How many times had he imagined bringing their children here someday, showing them where daddy saves lives and mommy revolutionizes neuroscience? All of it, every dream, every plan, every carefully orchestrated moment of their perfect relationship had been a lie. As he wandered aimlessly through the quiet hospital, Adrian caught his reflection in the darkened windows that overlooked the city. At 32, he was what most people would call successful, devastatingly so. His dark hair was perfectly styled even at midnight, his navy scrubs pressed and cleaned despite a 14-hour surgery day. His green eyes, which medical journals had once described as reassuringly steady, now looked hollow and lost. He was Dr. Adrian Cole, the surgeon who had performed the first successful pediatric heart transplant at St. Mary's. The man who had been featured on the cover of Cardiothoracic Surgery Today 3 times. The physician who had a waiting list of patients 6 months long because everyone wanted the best, and Adrian Cole was indisputably the best. But tonight, he felt like nothing more than a name on a wedding invitation. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the cardiac wing, and Adrian stepped out without consciously deciding where to go. His feet carried him toward the cardiac ICU, where he'd spent countless hours over the past decade, where the steady beep of heart monitors and the gentle whoosh of ventilators created a symphony he understood better than any conversation. It was here, in this sterile sanctuary of healing, that Adrian would have to figure out what came next. Because one thing was certain, the life he'd planned, the future he'd envisioned, the woman he'd thought he'd marry, none of it was real. And the most terrifying part? He had absolutely no idea who he was without it. The cardiac ICU's automatic doors whispered shut behind him, sealing him into a world where hearts could be repaired, where broken things could be made whole again. If only, Adrian thought as he sank into the chair at the nurse's station, human hearts were as simple to fix as the ones he operated on every day. But as fate would have it, he was about to discover that sometimes the most broken hearts can only be healed by the gentlest hands. The cardiac ICU at 12:47 a.m. was a study in controlled chaos, monitors beeping in steady rhythms, ventilators breathing for those who couldn't, and the soft shuffle of nurses moving between rooms like guardian angels in scrubs. Adrian sat at the central station, staring at the Williams file he'd finally retrieved, though the words blurred together like watercolors in rain. Dr. Cole, the voice was soft, concerned, with just a hint of a southern accent that reminded him of sweet tea and summer evenings. "Are you all right, honey?" He looked up to find a pair of warm brown eyes studying him with genuine worry. The woman attached to those eyes was petite, barely reaching his shoulder when he stood, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and laugh lines that suggested she smiled more often than she frowned. Her scrubs were a cheerful lavender color, and she wore a badge that read Lily Chun, RN, alongside a collection of small pins shaped like daisies. Adrian started, then stopped. When was the last time someone had asked if he was all right and actually wanted to hear the answer? Not counting patients or their families, he couldn't remember. "I'm fine. Just reviewing a case." Lily tilted her head, and Adrian recognized the look. It was the same expression he wore when a patient insisted they were fine, while clearly in distress. She glanced at the papers scattered across his lap, noting the coffee stain that definitely hadn't been there when he'd first dropped the file. "Uh-huh," she said, settling into the chair beside him with the easy familiarity of someone who'd worked too many night shifts to stand on ceremony. "And I'm the Queen of England. Dr. Cole, in the 3 years I've worked this unit, I've never seen you here past 10 p.m. unless we had an emergency surgery. It's nearly 1 in the morning. You look like you've seen a ghost, and you're holding that file upside down." Adrian glanced down and realized she was right. The Williams file was indeed inverted in his hands, which explained why the words had seemed so jumbled. He set it aside with what he hoped looked like dignity rather than defeat. "It's been a long day," he said finally. It's been a long day for all of us. Sugar. Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out a small thermos and 2 paper cups. But long days are easier when you don't face them alone. Tea. The simple kindness of the offer nearly undid him. When was the last time someone had offered to share something with him without wanting something in return? Vanessa certainly never, but no, he wouldn't think about Vanessa. Not now. Thank you, he said, accepting the cup. The tea was chamomile with honey, warm and comforting in a way that reminded him of his grandmother's kitchen when he was 7 years old and the world made sense. So, Lily said, settling back in her chair with her own cup. Want to talk about whatever's got the great Dr. Adrian Cole sitting in my ICU looking like his puppy just died? Despite everything, Adrian almost smiled. Your ICU? Honey, I've worked nights here for 3 years. I know every beep, every alarm, every quirk of every machine in this place. Dr. Peterson might be the attending, but from midnight to 8 a.m., this is my domain. She gestured around them with obvious pride. These are my patients, and you, she pointed at him with her teacup, are currently sitting in my chair looking like you need some serious TLC. There was something about her matter-of-fact kindness that loosened something tight in Adrian's chest. Maybe it was the exhaustion or the shock of what he'd overheard, or simply the way she looked at him, not as Dr. Adrian Cole, renowned heart surgeon, but as just a person who was hurting. Someone I trusted, he said slowly. Turned out to be someone I didn't know at all. Lily nodded sagely. The old thought I knew you, but you're actually a stranger situation. Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt and burned it in my backyard. Really? Oh honey, yes. My ex-husband, bless his cheating heart, turned out to be quite the actor. Spent 2 years married to a man who was apparently living a double life. Found out when his other girlfriend showed up at our anniversary dinner. She took a sip of tea, remarkably calm for someone discussing such betrayal. Worst part wasn't even the cheating, if I'm being honest. It was realizing that I'd been in love with a person who didn't actually exist. Adrian stared at her. How do you get past something like that? Time, Lily said simply. And the gradual understanding that his lies said nothing about who you are and everything about who he is. You can't control other people's choices, Dr. Cole, but you can control how you respond to them. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the steady rhythm of the monitors around them. Adrian found himself studying Lily's profile, the gentle curve of her cheek, the way she unconsciously hummed along with the heart monitors, the small scar just above her left eyebrow that suggested a story he found himself wanting to hear. Can I ask you something? He said. Shoot. Why nursing? You could have done anything. You're clearly intelligent, articulate, good with people. Why choose a job where you work nights and weekends, deal with other people's pain, and get paid a fraction of what you're worth? Lily's smile was soft and genuine. Because someone has to care about the person attached to the diagnosis. Don't get me wrong, Dr. Cole. You doctors are amazing. You see a failing heart and you fix it. You see a blocked artery and you clear it. But sometimes, in all that fixing, the person gets lost. The scared 16-year-old who doesn't understand why his chest hurts. The grandmother who's worried she'll never see her grandchildren graduate. The father who's trying to be brave for his family while he's terrified he might die. She gestured toward the patient rooms around them. Mr. Williams in room 3? He's not just a triple bypass. He's a man who's coached Little League for 15 years and is worried the kids won't have anyone to teach them to slide into home plate. Mrs. Chun in room 7. She's not just post-surgical monitoring. She's a woman who's been married for 43 years and has never spent a night away from her husband. Adrian followed her gaze, seeing the rooms with new eyes. He'd performed surgery on both those patients in the past week. He knew their medical histories, their surgical outcomes, their prognosis. But he realized, with a start, that he didn't know their stories. That's why I became a nurse, Lily continued. Because healing isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about remembering that every patient is someone's whole world. And you remember all of them? Every single one. Her voice was quiet but firm. Mrs. Patterson, who sang gospel songs the night before her heart surgery because it made her feel closer to her late mother. Mr. Rodriguez, who was more worried about his restaurant closing while he recovered than he was about his own health. Little Emma Sullivan, who drew me a picture of a daisy because I told her they were my favorite flowers. Daisies? Adrian found himself asking, remembering the pins on her badge. Lily's expression grew soft, tinged with a sadness that made Adrian want to reach out and comfort her. My mom loved daisies. Said they were the happiest flowers because they looked like little suns. She died when I was 22, cancer. I was in nursing school at the time, and I remember thinking how none of the nurses really saw her. They saw the diagnosis, the treatment plan, the prognosis. But they didn't see the woman who made the world's best chocolate chip cookies, who sang off-key in the shower, who always wore mismatched socks because she said life was too short for boring feet. She reached up and touched one of the daisy pins on her badge. So I decided I'd never let that happen to my patients. Everyone who comes through these doors gets seen, really seen, for who they are. Adrian felt something shift in his chest, not the sharp pain of betrayal he'd been carrying since overhearing Vanessa, but something warmer, something that felt almost like hope. That's, he started, then paused, searching for words. That's beautiful, Lily. What you do here, how you see people, it's beautiful. She blushed, a soft pink that made her look younger. It's just doing my job, Dr. Cole. No, he said firmly. It's not. What you do, the way you care, the way you remember, the way you make people feel human when they're at their most vulnerable. That's not just a job. That's a calling. And please, call me Adrian. Adrian, she repeated, as if testing how his name felt in her mouth. Can I ask you something now? Of course. What made you become a surgeon? And don't give me the textbook answer about wanting to save lives. I want to know what really drove you to choose a profession where you literally hold people's hearts in your hands. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, surprised by the question. When was the last time someone had asked him about his motivations rather than his achievements? My little sister, he said finally. Emma. She was born with a congenital heart defect, hypoplastic left heart syndrome. The doctors said she wouldn't live to see her first birthday. Lily's expression grew soft with understanding. But she did. She did. A surgeon at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, Dr. Marcus Webb, performed a series of surgeries that gave her a normal life. She's 28 now, married, with 2 kids of her own. She runs marathons, for God's sake. He smiled at the memory. Dr. Webb didn't just save her life. He gave our whole family a future we thought we'd lost. And you wanted to be that person for other families. Exactly. I wanted to be the miracle someone else was praying for. His smile faded. Though somewhere along the way, I think I lost sight of that. Got caught up in the prestige, the recognition, the other things. He thought of Vanessa, of their upcoming wedding announcement, of the life he'd been building that was more about appearances than purpose. How had he strayed so far from the idealistic young man who'd entered medical school, wanting to perform miracles? It's not too late, Lily said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. To remember why you started. To find your way back to the person who chose medicine because he wanted to hold hearts and make them whole. Adrian looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something he hadn't seen in years. Authenticity. Kindness without agenda. A woman who chose to spend her nights caring for strangers not because it would advance her career or elevate her social status, but because she genuinely believed every person deserved to be seen and valued. Lily, he said, surprising himself with the intensity in his voice. Thank you. For what? For reminding me who I used to be, and for showing me who I could be again. She smiled, and Adrian thought he'd never seen anything more beautiful than this woman in her lavender scrubs, surrounded by the gentle chaos of healing, offering comfort to everyone around her, including a lost surgeon who'd forgotten why he'd fallen in love with medicine in the first place. As if on cue, an alarm chimed from room 5, and Lily was instantly on her feet, her professionalism snapping into place like armor. Mrs. Morrison's heart rate is elevated, she said, already moving toward the room. Probably just anxiety. She always gets worked up around shift change, but I should check on her. Adrian watched her go, noting the way she straightened her shoulders, the quick assessment in her eyes, the gentle confidence in her movements. This was a woman who knew exactly who she was and why she did what she did. As she disappeared into the patient's room, Adrian could hear her voice, warm, reassuring, treating Mrs. Morrison not as a post-surgical case, but as a human being who needed comfort in the dark hours of the night. For the first time since he'd overheard Vanessa's betrayal, Adrian felt something other than pain. He felt possibility, not romantic possibility. He wasn't ready for that, might not be ready for a long time. but the possibility of remembering who he'd wanted to be when he chose this profession. The possibility of finding meaning beyond prestige. The possibility of learning to see his patients the way Lily saw hers, as whole human beings deserving of compassion, not just medical cases to be solved. He looked down at the Williams file in his hands and, for the first time, saw beyond the surgical procedure to the man, a 63-year-old grandfather who coached youth soccer and was terrified he'd never see his grandson score his first goal. Tomorrow, Adrian decided, he would ask Mr. Williams about soccer, about his grandson, about the parts of his life that had nothing to do with blocked arteries and everything to do with blocked dreams. It was a small step, but it was a beginning. And as Lily's gentle voice drifted from Mrs. Morrison's room, offering comfort in the dark hours before dawn, Adrian realized that sometimes the most profound healing happened not in the operating room, but in quiet moments when one human being truly saw another. He was still Dr. Adrian Cole, renowned heart surgeon. But maybe, just maybe, he could also become something more, something truer to the idealistic young man who'd chosen medicine to perform miracles. And if a certain night shift nurse in lavender scrubs had anything to do with that transformation, well, that was a complication he found himself surprisingly willing to explore. 3 days later, Adrian stood in the mahogany-paneled boardroom of Richardson Medical Group, surrounded by the city's medical elite and feeling like an actor who'd forgotten his lines. The room buzzed with anticipation. Champagne glasses clinked, designer dresses rustled, and everyone seemed to be performing their role in what Vanessa had called the social event of the medical season. Dr. Richard Richardson, Vanessa's father and the owner of half the private hospitals in the state, stood at the head of the room, his silver hair perfectly styled and his smile as sharp as a scalpel. Beside him, Vanessa looked stunning in a champagne-colored dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, and her smile was radiant as she accepted congratulations from the gathered crowd. Adrian watched it all from his position near the floor-to-ceiling windows, a crystal champagne flute untouched in his hand. To everyone in this room, he was playing his part perfectly, the successful surgeon, the devoted fiancé, the man who'd won the hand of medical royalty. But inside, he felt like he was drowning. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Richardson's voice boomed across the room, commanding immediate attention. Thank you all for joining us this evening. As you know, Margaret and I have called this gathering to share some wonderful news about our family. Adrian's chest tightened. This was it. The moment Vanessa had been planning for weeks. The formal announcement of their engagement to the people who mattered most in their professional circles. The moment that would make their union official in the eyes of the medical community. The moment he was about to destroy. It gives me tremendous pleasure, Dr. Richardson continued, to formally announce the engagement of my daughter, Dr. Vanessa Richardson, to Dr. Adrian Cole. These two brilliant physicians represent the future of medicine, a union of not just hearts, but of minds dedicated to advancing the field we all love. The room erupted in applause. Adrian felt Vanessa's eyes on him, expectant, probably wondering why he wasn't moving to join her father at the front of the room as they'd rehearsed. Instead, he remained by the windows, his reflection ghost-like in the glass, staring at a future that no longer existed. Adrian, darling. Vanessa's voice carried across the room, sweet as honey, but with an undertone only he could detect. Come join us. This was his cue. He was supposed to walk to the front, take her hand, accept the congratulations of their peers, and begin the performance that would continue until their wedding day and beyond. Until she decided his name and connections had served their purpose and she filed for divorce. Instead, Adrian pulled out his phone. Before we continue, he said, his voice cutting through the room's celebratory buzz, I think everyone should hear something. The room fell silent. Vanessa's smile flickered, confusion replacing confidence for just a moment before her composure snapped back into place. Adrian, what are you doing? She asked, but her voice carried the tiniest tremor of uncertainty. I'm sharing the truth, he said simply. His thumb hovered over the play button on the audio recording he'd made that night, the one he'd never intended to use but had kept as insurance against his own self-doubt. I think our friends and colleagues deserve to know what kind of union they're celebrating. Dr. Richardson's face was growing red. Dr. Cole, I'm not sure what this is about, but perhaps we should discuss this privately. No, Adrian said firmly. This is about honesty, about truth, about the kind of person we choose to trust with our hearts. He pressed play. Vanessa's voice filled the room, crystal clear and damning. Love, Adrian? Marcus, please. Adrian's just a name. A prestigious name that looks good on wedding invitations and medical journal bylines. But love? I want fire, not charity. I want passion, not politeness. Adrian Cole is many things, but he's certainly not stimulating. The silence that followed was deafening. Adrian watched the color drain from Vanessa's face, watched her father's expression shift from confusion to fury to something that looked almost like respect. The gathered crowd exchanged glances, some shocked, others clearly enjoying the unexpected drama. The recording continues, Adrian said calmly. But I think you've heard enough to understand that this engagement was built on a foundation of lies and manipulation. Dr. Richardson planned to marry me for my connections and divorce me within 2 years for half my assets. You bastard, Vanessa hissed, her composure finally cracking. How dare you humiliate me like this? I'm not humiliating you, Vanessa. I'm simply playing back your own words. Words you said while you were with another man in the on-call room at St. Mary's Hospital. Adrian's voice remained steady, professional, as if he were presenting a medical case rather than dismantling his life. Words that revealed who you really are beneath the polished exterior. Dr. Richardson stepped forward, and Adrian braced himself for anger, for threats, for the kind of scene that would destroy his career. Instead, the older man extended his hand. Dr. Cole, he said quietly, I owe you an apology. I raised my daughter to be many things, but apparently, I failed to teach her honor. The handshake was firm, respectful, and somehow more devastating to Vanessa than any shouting match could have been. Her own father was taking Adrian's side. Daddy, she started. Vanessa. Dr. Richardson's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. We'll discuss this at home. Privately. The room began to buzz with whispered conversations. Adrian knew that by tomorrow morning, the story would be all over the hospital grapevine, probably embellished and exaggerated with each telling. His reputation might survive, probably would, given the sympathy factor, but his private life would be dissected and analyzed for months. He found, somewhat to his surprise, that he didn't care. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced to the room, I apologize for the disruption to your evening. There will be no wedding. There will be no union of the Richardson and Cole medical dynasties. There will only be the truth, which is that some people enter our lives as blessings, and others enter as lessons. He set his untouched champagne glass on the nearest table and headed for the door. Adrian, wait. Vanessa's voice stopped him just as he reached the exit. When he turned, her face was streaked with tears, whether of genuine remorse or simply damaged pride. He couldn't tell. We can fix this. We can work through this. I made a mistake, but… No, Vanessa. His voice was gentle but final. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk on the way home. What you did was calculated, deliberate, and cruel. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed the very concept of love itself. So that's it. You're just going to throw away everything we built together. Adrian paused, considering the question seriously. What did we build exactly? A relationship based on professional advantages? A partnership designed to advance our careers? An engagement that served everyone's interests except the ones that actually mattered? He looked around the room one more time, taking in the faces of colleagues and acquaintances who had gathered to celebrate what they thought was love, but was actually just a very sophisticated business arrangement. I don't want to build a life with someone who sees me as a name on a wedding invitation, he said finally. I want to build a life with someone who sees me as me, flaws and all. Someone who chooses to love the person I am, not the reputation I've earned. As he walked out of the Richardson Medical Group building and into the cool evening air, Adrian felt something he hadn't experienced in years: freedom. The weight of expectations, of maintaining appearances, of living up to an image that had never quite fit. All of it lifted from his shoulders like a heavy coat he'd finally allowed himself to remove. His phone buzzed with notifications, texts, calls, probably reporters who'd already gotten wind of the story. Tomorrow there would be questions, explanations, the messy aftermath of a very public end to a very public engagement. But tonight, there was only the cool air, the city lights, and the strange peace that came from finally finally telling the truth. As he walked toward his car, Adrian realized he had nowhere urgent to be for the first time in months. No dinner reservations to keep, no social obligations to fulfill, no performance to maintain. The evening stretched before him, full of possibility. Almost without conscious thought, his steps turned toward St. Mary's Hospital, toward the cardiac ICU, toward a certain night shift nurse who'd reminded him that healing wasn't just about fixing what was broken. It was about seeing the person behind the patient. He had no idea what he'd say to Lily when he saw her. Had no plan, no agenda, no carefully constructed reason for showing up at her workplace. He just knew that in a world that had suddenly become uncertain and strange, she represented something authentic and kind. Something real. As he drove through the city streets, Adrian caught his reflection in the rearview mirror. For the first time in days, maybe years, he looked like himself. Not Dr. Adrian Cole, renowned surgeon and member of the medical elite. Just Adrian, a man who'd made a mistake, learned from it, and was ready to figure out what came next. The freedom was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. And for the first time since that horrible night in the hospital corridor, Adrian found himself looking forward to tomorrow. 2 weeks had passed since the announcement that had sent shockwaves through the medical community, and Adrian found himself spending more and more time on the night shift. Officially, he told himself it was because the cardiac ICU was quieter at night, better for catching up on paperwork and reviewing cases. Unofficially, he couldn't deny that it had everything to do with a certain nurse whose gentle humor and authentic kindness had become the highlight of his increasingly complicated days. Lily had never mentioned the broken engagement directly, though Adrian was certain she'd heard about it through the hospital grapevine. Instead, she'd simply continued to treat him with the same warm professionalism she showed everyone, offering tea during long nights, asking about his patients' stories rather than just their prognosis, and somehow making him remember why he'd fallen in love with medicine in the first place. Tonight was different, though. Tonight, Adrian had decided to take a leap of faith that terrified him more than any surgery he'd ever performed. He found Lily in the break room at 2 a.m., heating up what appeared to be leftover Chinese takeout and reading a paperback novel with a dog-eared cover. She looked up when he entered, and her face brightened with the kind of genuine smile that had been keeping him awake during his off hours. Well, Dr. Cole, she said, marking her place in the book. 2 weeks in a row of night shift appearances. Should I be worried you're developing insomnia, or are you just trying to avoid the day shift gossip mill? The latter, Adrian admitted, settling into the chair across from her. The break room was small and utilitarian, with flickering fluorescent lights and a coffee maker that had seen better decades. But somehow Lily's presence made it feel cozy. Though I have to admit, the company on nights is significantly better. Flatterer, she said, but her cheeks pinked slightly. Want some lo mein? I always order too much, and it's the good stuff from that place on 5th Street that's open all night. Thank you, he said, accepting the container she offered. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the quiet broken only by the distant sounds of the hospital at night. Monitors beeping, pages being called, the soft shuffle of nurses making their rounds. Lily, Adrian said finally, setting down his fork and gathering his courage. Can I ask you something? Shoot. What do you do when you're not here? On your days off, I mean. She tilted her head, studying him with those warm brown eyes that seemed to see more than they should. Why do you ask? Because I realized I know almost nothing about your life outside these walls. I know you became a nurse because of your mother. I know you care deeply about your patients. And I know you have an uncanny ability to make terrible hospital coffee taste almost drinkable. But I don't know. Who is Lily Chun when she's not wearing scrubs? That's a dangerous question, Dr. Cole, she said with a slight smile. You might be surprised by the answer. Try me. Lily leaned back in her chair, considering. Well, let's see. I live in a tiny apartment above Mrs. Patterson's bakery. Yes, the same Mrs. Patterson who sang gospel songs before her surgery. I have a garden on the fire escape where I grow herbs and vegetables that would probably horrify the health department if they knew I was eating tomatoes grown in coffee cans. I volunteer at the animal shelter on weekends, and I have 3 rescue cats who think they run my life. What are their names? Meredith, Christina, and Bailey. Adrian nearly choked on his lo mein. You named your cats after Grey's Anatomy characters? Don't judge me, Lily laughed. I started watching that show in nursing school, and when I found 3 abandoned kittens behind the hospital dumpster 2 years ago, the names just seemed to fit. Meredith's dramatic, Christina's brilliant but antisocial, and Bailey's the one who keeps everyone in line. That's... Adrian paused, searching for words. That's wonderful. I can't remember the last time I met someone who named their pets after fictional doctors. What about you? Lily asked. What does the great Dr. Adrian Cole do when he's not saving lives and breaking hearts on the society pages? The question caught him off guard, partly because of the casual way she referenced his recent public humiliation, and partly because he realized he didn't have a good answer. He started, then stopped. Honestly, I'm not sure I remember. The past few years have been all work, all the time. Medical conferences, research papers, charity galas that were more about networking than charity. He thought about his penthouse apartment, with its expensive furniture and empty refrigerator, its stunning view of a city he never had time to explore. I think I forgot how to be a person instead of just a doctor. Well, Lily said gently, maybe it's time to remember. The words hung between them, loaded with possibility. Adrian felt his heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with caffeine and everything to do with the woman sitting across from him, offering him a second chance at becoming human again. Lily, he said, his voice softer than he'd intended. Would you like to have dinner with me sometime? Not hospital cafeteria food or break room takeout. A real dinner, somewhere with actual tablecloths and food that isn't reheated in a microwave. The change in her expression was immediate and devastating. The warmth in her eyes flickered and died, replaced by something that looked almost like pain. Adrian, she said quietly, I can't. Why not? She stood abruptly, busying herself with clearing away the takeout containers, not meeting his eyes. Because you're engaged. Because Vanessa is a colleague, and I won't be responsible for breaking up someone else's relationship. Because it's complicated and messy, and I've been down that road before. Adrian stared at her, confusion and frustration warring in his chest. Lily, what are you talking about? I'm not engaged. The engagement ended 2 weeks ago, very publicly, as I'm sure you heard. She finally looked at him, and he was shocked to see unshed tears in her eyes. Of course you'd say that now. Men always say they're going to leave their wives, their fiancés, their girlfriends. They always have reasons, excuses, justifications. But they never actually do it, Adrian. They just string along the other woman until they get bored or until the guilt becomes too much. The other woman? Adrian's voice rose slightly. Lily, you're not. This isn't. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. I need you to listen to me very carefully. Vanessa and I are no longer engaged. The relationship is over. Completely and permanently over. Right? Lily said bitterly. And I suppose you expect me to believe that you ended a relationship with one of the most beautiful, successful women in the city because you suddenly realized you had feelings for a night shift nurse who lives above a bakery. The pain in her voice was like a physical blow. How had this gone so wrong so quickly? Yes, Adrian said simply. That's exactly what I expect you to believe, because it's the truth. The truth. Lily's laugh was harsh, nothing like her usual warm chuckle. The truth is that Dr. Vanessa Richardson was here yesterday morning, looking for you. And when she found out you'd been spending time on night shifts, she made it very clear that you two were working through some temporary difficulties, but that your engagement was still very much on. Adrian felt the blood drain from his face. She said what? She said, Lily's voice cracked slightly, that she understood why you might be confused right now, given the stress of planning a wedding and managing your demanding careers. She said you'd had a small disagreement about the wedding arrangements, but that it was all resolved now. She even showed me the engagement ring she was still wearing. Jesus Christ, Adrian breathed. Lily, she was lying. I ended our engagement 2 weeks ago in front of half the medical community. I played a recording of her admitting that she was only marrying me for my connections and planned to divorce me within 2 years. A recording? Lily's expression shifted slightly, uncertainty creeping in. She was cheating on me. I overheard her with another man in the on-call room, talking about how our engagement was just a business arrangement, how I was nothing more than a prestigious name to her. Lily sank back into her chair, her face pale. Adrian, if that's true, it is true. Every word of it. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found what he was looking for. Here. This is the article from the Medical Tribune about the broken engagement. It ran 3 days ago. He handed her the phone, watching as she read the headline. Prominent engagement ends in scandal. Dr. Adrian Cole exposes fiancé's betrayal at public announcement. Oh my God, Lily whispered, her hand covering her mouth. Adrian, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. When Vanessa came here and said those things, I just assumed. You assumed I was the kind of man who would pursue another woman while engaged, Adrian said quietly. Which, given your past experience with your ex-husband, makes perfect sense. I'm an idiot, Lily said, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. I'm a complete and utter idiot. Here you were, trying to ask me out, trying to move forward with your life, and I accused you of being a cheater based on lies from the woman who actually betrayed you. Lily, no, let me finish. I've spent the past 2 weeks thinking you were just another man who wanted to have his cake and eat it too. Every time you showed up here, every time you were kind to me, every time we shared tea and talked about our patients, I told myself it was just an affair waiting to happen. I built up walls, Adrian. I protected myself from something that wasn't even real. Adrian reached across the small table and gently took her hands in his. Hey, look at me. She raised her tear-filled eyes to meet his. You're not an idiot, he said firmly. You're a woman who's been hurt before, who had every reason to be cautious. Especially when the woman who hurt me came here specifically to make sure you doubt anything I might tell you. She played me, Lily said, anger now mixing with her tears. She knew exactly what to say to make me believe you were still engaged. She knew I'd never get involved with someone who was committed to someone else. Which means she saw you as a threat, Adrian pointed out. Think about it, Lily. Why else would she go to the trouble of tracking you down and lying to you? She could see what I was starting to feel, what was happening between us, and she wanted to stop it. Lily was quiet for a long moment, processing this. What were you starting to feel? She asked softly. Adrian's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. Like maybe I was remembering who I used to be. Like maybe I could learn to be more than just a surgeon with good reviews and impressive credentials. Like maybe I could be the kind of man who deserves someone like you. Adrian, I know it's complicated, he continued. I know I come with baggage, a very public, very messy end to an engagement, a career that demands too much of my time, and probably a dozen other red flags you haven't discovered yet. But Lily, what I feel when I'm with you, it's the most real thing I've experienced in years. What do you feel? She whispered. Peace, he said immediately. Like I can finally stop performing and just be. Like maybe being Dr. Adrian Cole isn't the most important thing about me. Like maybe the most important thing is just being Adrian, the man who wants to hear about your cats and your garden and why you chose daisies as your favorite flower. Lily's tears were falling faster now, but her smile was breaking through like sunlight after rain. They're my favorite because my mom said they looked like little suns. Because even in the darkest garden, they could bring light. Like you do, Adrian said. Every night I've spent in this ICU, watching you care for patients who might not remember your name, but will never forget your kindness. You bring light to the darkest places, Lily. You brought light to mine. She was quiet for so long that Adrian began to worry he'd pushed too hard, said too much, revealed feelings that were too intense for someone he'd only truly known for a few weeks. Then, slowly, her fingers tightened around his. Ask me again, she said softly. What? Ask me again. About dinner. About getting to know each other outside these hospital walls. About seeing if this thing between us is as real as it feels. Adrian's heart soared. Lily-chan, would you like to have dinner with me? Somewhere with actual tablecloths and food that isn't reheated in a microwave. Yes, she said, her smile now bright enough to light up the entire break room. Yes, I would like that very much. When? I'm off tomorrow night. Are you free? I'll make myself free, Adrian said, then paused. Actually, I have a better idea. You said you have a garden on your fire escape? A very small one, Lily said, looking puzzled. Would you let me cook for you? I mean, really cook, not just heat up takeout. I used to love cooking before my life became all about hospital schedules and social obligations. I'd love to cook for you. Maybe see this famous garden and meet the cats named after Grey's Anatomy characters. Lily's laugh was pure joy. You want to cook dinner for me in my tiny apartment above a bakery. I want to see who you are when you're not wearing scrubs, Adrian said, echoing her earlier words. I want to meet Meredith, Christina, And Bailey, I want to see your herbs growing in coffee cans and understand how someone as amazing as you ended up in my life exactly when I needed to remember what authentic kindness looks like. Okay, Lily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, come cook for me. Come see my ridiculous little life and my dramatic cats and my fire escape garden. Come see me. As they sat in the break room at 2:30 in the morning, hands intertwined across a table covered with empty takeout containers, Adrian realized that this was the moment everything changed. Not the moment he'd ended his engagement to Vanessa, not the moment he'd publicly exposed her betrayal, but this moment, when a kind woman with tears in her eyes decided to trust him despite every reason she had to be cautious. Lily, he said, yes. Thank you. For what? For giving me a second chance. For letting me prove that not all men are like your ex-husband. For seeing something in me worth believing in. Adrian, yes. Thank you for being patient with my fears. For understanding why I had to protect myself. For showing me that maybe, just maybe, some risks are worth taking. Outside the break room, the hospital continued its never-ending cycle of healing and hope. But inside, two people who had both been broken by betrayal were discovering that sometimes the most beautiful things grow in the cracks where the light gets in. Tomorrow night, Adrian would knock on the door of a small apartment above a bakery, armed with grocery bags and hope. Tomorrow night, Lily would introduce him to 3 cats and a garden that defied all logic, but somehow produced the most beautiful tomatoes in the city. Tomorrow night, they would begin to discover whether the connection they'd found in the sterile halls of the cardiac ICU could flourish in the real world, where hearts were just as fragile but infinitely more complex than the ones Adrian repaired in surgery. But for now, in this moment, it was enough to sit together in the fluorescent glow of a hospital break room, hands clasped and hearts cautiously opening, both of them finally ready to believe in the possibility of something real. The next evening, Adrian stood outside Lily's apartment building, holding 2 bags of groceries and questioning every decision that had led him to this moment. The building was older, with worn brick and a faded awning, nestled between Mrs. Patterson's bakery and a small florist shop that had seen better days. It wasn't the kind of neighborhood he was used to, far from the gleaming high-rises and manicured streets of his usual world, but there was something authentic about it that put him at ease. He was just reaching for the buzzer when the door to the bakery opened and a silver-haired woman emerged, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. "You must be Dr. Cole," she said with a knowing smile. "I'm Margaret Patterson. Lily's mentioned you." "Mrs. Patterson," Adrian said, recognizing the name from Lily's stories. "The gospel singer. How are you feeling after your surgery?" Her face lit up. "Bless your heart. You remember that?" "I'm doing wonderful, thanks to you and that sweet girl upstairs. She's been fussing over me like I'm her own grandmother ever since I got home." "That sounds like Lily." "Mm. She's special, that one. Doesn't have much, but she'd give you the shirt off her back if you needed it." Mrs. Patterson's eyes narrowed slightly, taking on the protective expression of someone who'd appointed herself as Lily's guardian. "I hope you know how lucky you are." "I'm beginning to," Adrian said honestly. "Good. Because that girl's been hurt before, and I won't stand for anyone else breaking her heart. Are we clear?" Despite the fact that this woman probably weighed 90 pounds soaking wet, Adrian found himself slightly intimidated. "Crystal clear, ma'am." "Excellent. She's apartment 2B. The buzzer doesn't work, so just go on up." "And Dr. Cole?" "Yes. Thank you for fixing this old ticker of mine. I've got grandchildren to spoil and gospel songs left to sing." As Adrian climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor, he could hear music drifting from behind Lily's door, something soft and jazzy that made him smile. He knocked gently, and the music stopped. "Just a minute," Lily's voice called, followed by what sounded like frantic tidying and the distinct sound of cat paws scampering across hardwood floors. When the door opened, Adrian's breath caught. Lily had traded her hospital scrubs for a soft blue sundress that brought out her eyes, and her hair fell in loose waves around her shoulders. She looked nervous and beautiful, and so different from the polished perfection he'd grown accustomed to with Vanessa that it took him a moment to find his voice. "Hi," he said finally. "Hi yourself," she replied, then noticed the grocery bags. "Please tell me you didn't buy out the entire store." "Just enough to make something special," Adrian said, following her into the apartment. "I hope you like." He stopped mid-sentence, taking in his surroundings. The apartment was tiny, probably smaller than his walk-in closet, but it was undeniably charming. Books lined makeshift shelves created from boards and bricks, plants crowded every available surface, and the walls were covered with an eclectic mix of artwork that looked like it had been chosen for love rather than investment value. "I know it's not much," Lily said, suddenly self-conscious. "The rent's affordable, and Mrs. Patterson doesn't mind the cats." "It's perfect," Adrian interrupted, and he meant it. "It feels like home." A large orange tabby chose that moment to wind around Adrian's legs, purring loudly. "That's Bailey," Lily said. "She's the welcoming committee. Meredith is hiding under the couch because she's dramatic, and Christina is probably judging you from somewhere high up because she's antisocial." As if summoned, a sleek black cat appeared on top of the refrigerator, green eyes assessing Adrian with what could only be described as feline skepticism. "Christina, I presume? The one and only. Don't take it personally. She doesn't like anyone except me, and some days I'm not even sure about that." Adrian set the grocery bags on the small kitchen counter, marveling at how efficiently Lily had organized the space. Every inch was utilized, from the magnetic spice rack on the refrigerator to the hanging baskets that held fresh herbs. "Your fire escape garden?" he asked, noticing the herbs. "Some of it. The bigger stuff is outside. Want to see?" She led him through the apartment's single bedroom, which he tried very hard not to look at too closely, to a window that opened onto a fire escape that had been transformed into something magical. Wooden planters of various sizes held an impressive array of vegetables and flowers, all thriving despite their unconventional containers. "Lily, this is incredible," Adrian said, stepping carefully onto the fire escape. "How do you grow tomatoes in coffee cans?" "Very carefully," she laughed, "and with a lot of love and plant food. Mrs. Patterson saves all her coffee cans for me, and the florist next door gives me their older planters when they get new ones. It's not conventional, but it works." Adrian knelt beside a particularly robust tomato plant, noting the careful attention to drainage and spacing. "You've got quite the green thumb. My mom taught me. She said growing things was like nursing. You had to pay attention, be patient, and believe that with enough care, even the most broken things could flourish." The sun was setting behind the city buildings, casting a golden glow over Lily's unconventional garden. Adrian could see the care and creativity that had gone into every aspect of this small sanctuary, and he felt something shift in his chest, a recognition of the woman who could create beauty anywhere, who could nurture life in the most unlikely places. "What are you making for dinner?" Lily asked, settling onto a small stool beside the tomato plants. "Pasta primavera with fresh herbs," Adrian said. "I noticed you had basil and oregano out here, and I brought some vegetables that I thought would complement." He was interrupted by the sound of the apartment's front door slamming open with such force that the fire escape actually vibrated. "Where is she?" A voice screeched from inside the apartment. A voice Adrian recognized with a sinking heart. "Vanessa." "Oh, God," Lily whispered, all the color draining from her face. "I thought you said." "I did. She shouldn't be here." Adrian was already moving toward the window, but Vanessa's voice cut through the evening air like a knife. "Lily, I know you're here, and I know he's with you." They climbed back through the window to find Vanessa standing in the middle of Lily's living room, looking like an avenging angel in designer clothes. Her perfectly styled hair was slightly mussed, her usually flawless makeup showed signs of stress, and her eyes blazed with a fury that made Adrian take a protective step in front of Lily. "How did you get in?" Lily asked, her voice shaking. "Your downstairs neighbor was coming in. I told her I was a friend." Vanessa's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Though friend is certainly not the word I'd use to describe what you are." "Vanessa, you need to leave," Adrian said firmly. "Now." "I need to leave?" Vanessa laughed, high and brittle. "That's rich, Adrian. I need to leave while you're here playing house with this. Careful." Adrian's voice carried a warning that made Christina hiss from her perch on the refrigerator. "This what, Vanessa?" Lily stepped out from behind Adrian, her chin raised defiantly despite the fear in her eyes. "This woman who actually cares about her patients? This woman who doesn't see people as stepping stones to advance her career? This woman who seduced my fiancé?" Vanessa snarled. "Your fiancé?" Lily's voice rose in pitch. "Are you completely delusional? You lost the right to call him that when you decided to cheat on him with someone else. That was a mistake. It was a choice. Lily shot back, her protective instincts for Adrian overriding her usual gentle nature. Just like coming here tonight is a choice. Just like lying to me about still being engaged was a choice. You don't get to make choices that hurt people and then act like the victim when there are consequences. Vanessa's composure cracked completely. You think you know him? You think you understand what you're getting into? Adrian Cole is a workaholic who puts his career above everything else. He'll get bored with playing normal, with pretending to be interested in your little apartment and your pathetic cats and your sad little life. And when he does, he'll go back to someone who can actually match his success, someone who belongs in his world. Get out, Adrian said quietly, but his voice carried the kind of authority that made even hardened residents jump to attention. Get out now, before I call security. Security? Vanessa laughed again. What security? This isn't your fancy hospital, Adrian. This is the real world, where people like her. She gestured dismissively at Lily. Serve coffee to people like us. People like her, Adrian said, his voice deadly calm. Spend their nights caring for strangers, offering comfort to the scared and the dying, making the world a little bit kinder with every shift they work. People like you destroy trust, manipulate emotions, and use other human beings as chess pieces in your personal games of advancement. You're going to regret this, Vanessa said, her voice shaking with rage. Both of you. I have connections, influence. I can make your lives very difficult. Are you threatening us? Lily asked, incredulous. I'm promising you that this fantasy you're living won't last. Men like Adrian don't end up with women like you, Lily. We both know how this story ends. The cruelty in her voice was like a physical blow. Adrian watched Lily flinch, saw doubt creep into her eyes, and felt something protective and fierce surge through his chest. You're right, he said quietly. Men like who I used to be don't end up with women like Lily. They end up with women like you, beautiful, successful, and completely hollow inside. But the man I'm trying to become? The man Lily is helping me remember how to be? He would count himself lucky beyond measure to be worthy of someone with her kindness, her authenticity, her capacity for love. How touching, Vanessa sneered. We'll see how long that lasts when the novelty wears off and you remember what you're giving up. I'm not giving up anything, Adrian said. I'm gaining everything that actually matters. Vanessa looked between them for a long moment, her face cycling through emotions, rage, disbelief, and finally, something that might have been genuine hurt. Fine, she said finally. But don't come crying to me when this all falls apart. When you realize that pretty words and romantic gestures don't make up for fundamental incompatibility. When you figure out that good intentions aren't enough to bridge the gap between your worlds. She headed for the door, then paused with her hand on the knob. And Lily? When he breaks your heart, not if, when, remember that I warned you. Remember that you chose to ignore every red flag, every obvious sign that this was a mistake. The door slammed behind her with enough force to rattle the windows. The silence that followed was deafening. Adrian and Lily stood frozen in the middle of her small living room, the echoes of Vanessa's toxic words hanging in the air like smoke. Adrian, Lily said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Is she right? About what? About all of it. About us being from different worlds. About this being a fantasy that won't last. About you eventually getting bored with. She gestured around her apartment. All of this. Adrian felt his heart break a little at the doubt in her voice, at the way Vanessa's poison had found its mark so quickly and efficiently. Look at me, he said gently, taking her hands in his. Really look at me. Lily raised her eyes to meet his, and he could see all her insecurities reflected there. The fear that she wasn't enough, wasn't successful enough, wasn't sophisticated enough for someone like him. I spent 6 years with a woman who saw me as a prize to be won, a connection to be leveraged, a name to be displayed at social functions. 6 years with someone who never once asked me what I dreamed about, what scared me, what made me laugh when no one else was around. And you know what? I was miserable. Successful, respected, envied, and absolutely miserable. He lifted one hand to cup her cheek, thumb brushing away a tear she didn't realize had fallen. In 2 weeks of knowing you, really knowing you, I've remembered what it feels like to be excited about something other than surgical outcomes. I've remembered what it's like to look forward to seeing someone, Not because they can advance my career or improve my social standing, but because being around them makes me want to be a better person. But she's not wrong about the differences between us, Lily said. You have a penthouse apartment and a six-figure car and colleagues who quote your research papers. I live above a bakery with 3 cats and grow vegetables in coffee cans. And which one of us is happier? Adrian asked softly. Which one of us has friends who genuinely care about them? Which one of us goes to sleep at night knowing they've made a real difference in someone's life? Adrian, I don't want a woman who matches my tax bracket, Lily. I want a woman who matches my values. I want someone who chooses compassion over competition, who sees people as human beings rather than networking opportunities, who can find joy in small things and beauty in unexpected places. He gestured around her apartment, at the books that had been chosen for love rather than status, at the plants that thrived despite their humble containers, at the photos on the walls that captured moments of genuine happiness rather than carefully staged perfection. I want someone who can create a home anywhere, who can make hospital break room tea taste like a celebration, who can calm a scared patient with nothing more than presence and kindness. I want you, Lily, not despite our differences, but because of them. Because you're everything I didn't know I was missing. Lily was crying now, but her smile was breaking through like sunrise after the longest night. What if she's right, though? She whispered. What if this is just the novelty of something different? What if you wake up 6 months from now and realize you've made a terrible mistake? Adrian was quiet for a long moment, considering the question seriously because she deserved nothing less than complete honesty. Then I'll have had 6 months of being happier than I've ever been in my life, he said finally. 6 months of remembering who I wanted to be when I chose medicine. 6 months of learning what it means to truly care about someone else's happiness more than my own success. He pulled her closer until her forehead rested against his chest and he could feel her heartbeat against his ribs. But Lily, I don't think that's going to happen. I think what's going to happen is that I'm going to fall more in love with you every day. I think I'm going to discover new things about you that amaze me. Your strength, your creativity, your ability to find humor even in the darkest moments. I think we're going to build something together that's stronger than either of us could be alone. You really believe that? She asked, her voice muffled against his shirt. I believe it enough to stand here in your apartment, holding you while 3 cats judge my worthiness, promising you that whatever comes next, we'll face it together. As if summoned by his words, Bailey appeared at their feet, purring loudly and weaving between their legs. Even Christina had descended from her perch to observe from a more sociable distance. I think Bailey approves, Lily said, her laugh watery but genuine. What about you? Adrian asked. Do you approve? Are you willing to take this risk with me, despite everything Vanessa said? Despite all the very real differences between our lives? Lily pulled back to look at him, and Adrian saw something in her eyes that made his heart soar: determination. The same determination that had led her to become a nurse despite the long hours and modest pay. The same determination that had led her to create a garden on a fire escape and a home in a tiny apartment above a bakery. Yes, she said firmly. Yes, I'm willing to take this risk. Because Vanessa was wrong about one thing. This isn't a fantasy. This is real. What I feel when I'm with you, what you make me believe about myself, about what's possible, that's the most real thing I've ever experienced. Adrian kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Around them, Lily's small apartment seemed to expand with possibility. Two people who had both been broken by betrayal, choosing to trust again, choosing to believe in something better. When they finally broke apart, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. So, he said with a smile, should I start cooking? Because I have a feeling we're going to need our strength for whatever comes next. Actually, Lily said, her eyes sparkling with mischief, I have a better idea. Mrs. Patterson made fresh bread this morning, and the florist next door grows the most amazing herbs. What do you say we create something completely new together? Something that's never existed before, just like us. Adrian laughed, the sound rich and free and full of joy. I say that sounds perfect. Absolutely perfect. As they moved toward the kitchen together, cats trailing behind them like a small parade, Adrian realized that this moment, this woman, this unexpected life, was worth every broken dream that had led him here. Vanessa had been wrong about everything. Some stories don't end the way bitter people predict they will. Some stories, The best stories begin in the most unexpected places and bloom into something more beautiful than anyone could have imagined. And sometimes, just sometimes, the heart that needs the most healing finds exactly the right person to help it remember how to be whole again. 6 months later, Adrian stood in the supply closet of the cardiac ICU, holding a single daisy and feeling more nervous than he had before his first solo heart surgery. Outside, the hospital buzzed with its usual controlled chaos, but in this small, sterile space surrounded by bandages and 4 bags, he was rehearsing words that could change everything. The past 6 months had been a revelation. True to his promise, Adrian had rediscovered the joy in medicine, spending more time talking with patients about their lives beyond their diagnoses. He'd reduced his social obligations by 80%, traded charity galas for quiet evenings in Lily's apartment, and learned that happiness could be found in the simplest moments. Watching Lily tend her fire escape garden, listening to her hum while she worked, waking up on weekend mornings to find Christina finally deigning to purr on his chest. But it hadn't been without challenges. Vanessa's prediction about their different worlds had proven partially true. There were colleagues who couldn't understand his relationship with just a nurse, social events where Lily felt out of place despite his efforts to include her, moments when the gap between their professional lives felt insurmountable. There had been fights, too, real ones, where they'd had to learn each other's languages of conflict and resolution. Lily's tendency to withdraw when she felt insecure, Adrian's workaholic habits that were harder to break than he'd anticipated, the pressure from his medical circles to settle down with someone more suitable. Through it all, though, they'd held on to what mattered most, the deep, abiding respect they'd found in each other, the way they made each other laugh, the shared commitment to healing that had brought them together in the first place. Tonight, Adrian was ready to make it official. The supply closet door opened, and Lily appeared, looking puzzled. "Dr. Williams said you needed to see me urgently about supplies for room 7, she said, then noticed the daisy in his hand. "Adrian, what are you?" "I lied," he said simply. "Well, I asked Dr. Williams to lie for me, which makes me complicit in the lying, which is probably not the best way to start this conversation." "Start what conversation?" Lily asked, though her eyes were already brightening with suspicion and hope. "The conversation where I tell you that 6 months ago, I was a man who thought he had everything figured out. I had a successful career, a prestigious engagement, a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt empty on the inside." He stepped closer, noting the way her breath caught, the way her hand moved instinctively to her throat. "And then I met a nurse who offered me tea in the middle of the night and reminded me that healing isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about seeing the person behind the patient. Who showed me that success without authenticity is just a very expensive form of failure." "Adrian, I've learned so much from you, Lily. I've learned that love isn't about finding someone who fits into your existing life. It's about creating a new life together that's better than anything either of you could have built alone. I've learned that home isn't a place, it's a person. And I've learned that the best decisions are the ones that scare you and exhilarate you in equal measure." He dropped to one knee in the supply closet, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Lily's hands flew to her mouth, tears already starting to fall. "This isn't how I planned to do this," Adrian admitted with a shaky laugh. "I had elaborate plans for a romantic dinner, maybe on the roof of the hospital where we could see the whole city. But then I realized that our love story didn't start in some fancy restaurant. It started here, in this hospital, in stolen moments between rounds, in shared coffee breaks and late-night conversations, in the quiet, messy, chaotic, beautiful spaces where real life happens." He opened the box, revealing a simple ring, elegant, not flashy, with a tiny sapphire nestled beside a diamond, like two lives side by side, different but complementing each other. "I want a life of imperfect moments with you, Lily. A life where we argue and make up, where we figure things out one day at a time. I want your fire escape garden, your humming, your stubborn cat, your heart that never gives less than everything. I want to keep becoming the man I am when I'm with you." Lily's tears spilled freely now, but her smile was radiant. She dropped to her knees, right there with him, ignoring the disinfectant smell and the mop bucket in the corner. "You're such an idiot," she whispered, laughing through her tears. "But you're my idiot. And yes, yes, Adrian. Of course, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and for a second they just stared at each other, both stunned by how right it felt. Then the overhead speaker crackled. Code blue. ICU. Room 7. Code blue. They froze. Adrian sighed. I did fake the supplies. But I didn't fake the room 7 thing. They've got a tricky arrhythmia on the monitor. I was going to handle it after I proposed. Lily laughed, wiping her cheeks. Then let's go save a life, fiancé. They stood, grabbed gloves and masks, and burst out of the closet like a couple of adrenaline-charged superheroes. Two healers, newly engaged, racing toward their shared future one heartbeat at a time. And somewhere between the chaos and the love, they knew they were exactly where they were meant to be. If you made it to the end, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. It truly means the world to us. See you in the next one.